Welcome back to Lurking Shadows, the home of bone-chilling tales and paranormal adventures. I'm your guide through the realms of the unknown, Sir Shadows, and today we've got few spine-tingling ghost stories that will send shivers down your spine. But before we dive into the haunted narrative, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Let me share a haunting tale that unfolded in a small and tranquil town in the northeastern part of Nepal. The protagonist of this eerie narrative is my friend's elder brother, a college student back in the 1980s. This introverted 18-year-old, just starting his college journey, didn't socialize much and found solace in the quietude of his hometown. Their house, nestled on the outskirts of town in the countryside, stood as a haven. However, the only college in town wasn't exactly within a stone's throw. Despite having the option of shared taxis, he chose the less traveled path, a narrow trail cutting through a forest, a shortcut of sorts. In the initial months, his daily return home shifted slightly, marking a change in routine. As a family, we attributed it to newfound friendships, hoping he had finally embraced camaraderie. Simultaneously, an alarming transformation gripped him. His once sturdy frame began to wither, a noticeable weight loss signaling an underlying concern. Concerns morphed into suspicion. Maybe he had fallen into the wrong company, possibly getting involved with undesirable elements. Fears mounted, and his family confronted him. In response to their inquiries, he denied any wrongdoing, and both teachers and peers corroborated his version of events. Yet the physical toll persisted. Skeletal and frail, he became a mere shadow of his former self. Desperation prompted visits to numerous doctors, each failing to pinpoint the cause behind his mysterious affliction. When conventional remedies proved futile, the family turned to an unconventional solution. In the heart of their distress, they sought the guidance of a lama, a Buddhist monk known for his mystical insights. The lama, after examining the ailing young man, delved into a crucial question. Had he been meeting someone? Initially resistant, he eventually admitted to clandestine encounters with a young woman along the forested trail to college. The lama, rather than condemning him, handed him a needle with thread and instructed him to discreetly attach it to her clothing during their next meeting. The next morning, as instructed, the young man, his parents, and the lama ventured to the mysterious meeting place. The lama, following the thread trail, led them to a peculiar spot where it seemed to vanish into the earth. Undeterred by the challenging terrain, they returned with tools, ready to unearth the enigma hidden beneath the soil. After digging for some depth, human remains emerged, prompting a call to the local authorities. Forensic identification, a far cry from today's technological prowess, left the remains unclassified. Undeterred, the lama, holding a piece of the unearthed bones, embarked on a spiritual quest. In a mesmerizing act, he channeled the spirit of the deceased woman and sought to understand her lasting desires. The ghostly revelation sent shivers down their spines. The spirit professed an unyielding attachment to the young man, vowing never to relinquish its hold. The monk, with mystical practices, tried to cut the unnatural bond, supported by the young man's family. Despite their collective efforts, his condition spiraled into a relentless deterioration, ultimately leading to his untimely demise. Let me recount a true tale, one that unfolded in the life of my friend Walsh, who held a managerial position at a bank. Led a content and joyous life with his wife Sarah and their two children, a son and a daughter. Their home echoed with the harmonious laughter of the children, creating an atmosphere of warmth and serenity. Sarah dedicated her days to caring for the family, ensuring both the son and daughter grew in happiness. The daughter, akin to a radiant fairy, graced their household with her beauty. However, her enchanting charm led to a protective stance. She was not allowed to venture outside. Visitors who glimpsed the daughter were captivated by her allure, leaving them unable to resist showering her with affection. Life was idyllic until the tides of change swept Walsh away, as he received a job transfer to a town nestled a bit away from the bustling city. Initially, he struggled with the transition, commuting between the old house and the new environment in the village. However, the family eventually secured a rented home in the village, where nature's bounty surrounded them. A sizable pond lay in front of the house, and a majestic peepal tree added to the picturesque setting. The air was pure and the water pristine, contributing to the daughter's blossoming radiance. One fateful day, as Walsh attended to his banking duties, an elderly lady visited their home, Setting eyes on Walsh's daughter, the old lady scooped her into her arms. Alarmed, Sarah intervened, retrieving her daughter from the unfamiliar embrace. The old lady, with an unusual request, pleaded for the daughter, stating she couldn't bear to be without her. Stricken by the odd encounter, Sarah firmly dismissed the elderly visitor, asserting the daughter was theirs to cherish. The unsettling episode marked a turning point. That night, the daughter's health deteriorated suddenly, prompting Walsh to rush her to the doctor. Medical tests were conducted, treatments administered, yet her condition remained grim. Fearing supernatural influences, the family sought the guidance of a local priest or shaman, well versed in the realms of exorcism. A talisman was placed around the daughter's neck, and miraculously, she began to recover. A period of tranquility followed, but the peace was transient. One day, the daughter vanished inexplicably, sending shockwaves through Walsh's household. Desperation set in as they scoured the entire house, but the daughter was nowhere to be found. Suspicion loomed over the elderly lady from the past encounter, and when Walsh's wife confronted her, the old lady cryptically replied, "I had asked for the daughter, but you did not give. Now find her." Despite relentless searches, the daughter remained elusive. Walsh, now engulfed in despair, turned to the police for assistance. A curious detail emerged during the investigation. The last sighting of the girl was near the pond. Yet, despite thorough combing of the area, the only trace discovered was the girl's dress floating on the water's surface. The mysterious disappearance confounded everyone, leaving Walsh and his wife Sarah in a perpetual state of grief and bewilderment. 40 years have passed, but the fate of Walsh's daughter remains shrouded in mystery. The old lady, who seemed to hold the key to the puzzle, vanished without a trace. The heart-wrenching tale of a daughter lost to the depths of uncertainty remains etched in couple's life, a haunting chapter that defies explanation. Once upon a time, there was a newlywed couple who had an immense love for traveling, especially exploring ancient cities and towns. Their adventurous spirits led them to plan a visit to a historic town, rich with old temples, palaces, and enchanting gardens. However, like any other ancient place, there was a spot that locals warned against entering, a grand haveli with a closed gate, surrounded by mystery. The couple, undeterred by such warnings, embarked on a 2-day journey to this fascinating town. Upon reaching what was considered the best motel in the town, they were surprised to find it nearly deserted. Only a manager and an elderly caretaker were present to attend to their needs. When they questioned the emptiness, the manager explained that the rainy season often kept visitors away. On the first day, they explored a couple of historical sites and returned to their hotel, where they enjoyed a delightful meal before retiring for the night. The following day, eager to uncover the remaining gems of the town, they visited a small eatery for a refreshing cup of tea. While settling the bill, they inquired about other interesting places to visit. The waiter suggested a beautiful park just a kilometer away, but warned them not to venture beyond it. Intrigued, the couple decided to explore the mysterious haunted house. Despite not believing in ghosts or witchcraft, upon reaching the haveli, they opened the gates and boldly entered. The garden was impressive, and they explored the ancient structure, capturing memories with their camera. As night fell, they returned to their hotel, where an elderly man, responsible for guest care, served them dinner. The couple invited him to join them, initiating a conversation that gradually unfolded the mysterious tale of the town. Sam, as the old man was called, engaged in a friendly chat with the couple. "Are you from the city, husband?" "Yes, we love traveling. When we heard about this ancient city, we decided to pay a visit." "Good. What places did you visit?" "Wife, many places. This town is so beautiful. We tried to cover almost all the places of interest, but the best was the park that a waiter suggested us to go to." "Which park? The one near the lake?" "Yes." "Good. You didn't go any further, did you?" "Yeah." "Nah. But why?" "Good. That place is not suitable to visit, especially for young girls and women." "Wife, but why?" "Because it is said that a witch lives in a house further away from that park. She is rumored to be more than 100 years old, but looks like a young, beautiful woman. Many years ago, girls and young women started disappearing from the town. It was later discovered that the witch kidnapped them, taking away body parts she desired. Since then, a priest locked her in that house and everyone was prohibited from entering that area. Wow, these are fake rumors. Yes, we visited that house today and see we are here in front of you, unharmed. These are just rumors. What, did you visit that place? Yes, and believe me, there is nothing in there. Okay, son, I have to leave now. It's getting late. What happened? No, I have to leave. Good night. The couple had a good laugh after Sam left. After dinner, they turned off the lights and settled down for the night. In the middle of the night, the husband heard a voice counting. Voice female, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Oh dear, what are you doing? We have to return tomorrow. After a while, 9 or 99, 888, 666, 333. Why are you counting money at this hour of night? Sleep, nah. Again, voice 535, 4566, 6788, 9878, and the counting continued, then stopped. Suddenly, there was a loud noise of the opening and closing of the door. Husband, OMG, have you gone mad or what? He sat up to realize that his wife was not there. Assuming she must be in the washroom, he tried to sleep, but something felt off. He opened the door of his bedroom and was shocked to see his wife dead on the floor, completely bald. Realization dawned upon him. The voice he heard was that of the witch, and she was counting his wife's hairs. She must have found her hair beautiful and decided to take them away. The husband, terrified and grief-stricken, was now confronted with the unsettling truth of the mysterious and ominous encounter in the forbidden house. Let me share a hair-raising experience that unfolded right herein. Richmond, Virginia. It involves my friend's elder brother, who had recently moved to this charming city after a job transfer and promotion, becoming the new manager. His workplace provided him with a swanky company apartment in the posh area of Richmond, known for its elegance and charm. Now, my buddy and I were also working in the same city, but we had our own place. His elder brother, the manager, usually stayed out of town due to frequent visits to dealerships. He spent around 5 to 10 days at the company apartment when work brought him back. Little did he know that this seemingly luxurious abode held an ominous secret. From the outset, he felt an unsettling vibe in that apartment, but he chose to keep it to himself. Adding to the eerie ambiance was the strange silence from the neighbors, who never bothered to exchange pleasantries. Undeterred, he shrugged off the weirdness and went about his routine. As he returned from his business trips, he consistently noticed things out of place in the apartment, giving him the unsettling feeling that someone else had been using his home in his absence. Nights brought an added layer of discomfort, with phantom footsteps echoing through the rooms. Sometimes he felt a mysterious touch or heard indistinct calls for his name. Even screams pierced the silence on a couple of occasions, but he brushed them off as mere figments of an exhausted mind, refusing to entertain thoughts of the supernatural. This unsettling pattern persisted. One fateful night, about a month into his stay, he returned from a visit at around 11 p.m., exhausted and ready for a good night's sleep. Little did he know that this night would unravel the ghastly secret harbored by the apartment. An hour into his slumber, he felt a presence joining him in bed. Darkness enveloped the room, and fear gripped his senses as he hid under the blanket, desperately trying to ignore the growing sense of dread. Suddenly, a noise shattered the silence. Something had fallen from the closet. Terrified, he froze as an unseen force seemingly sat on him. As he mustered the courage to peek from under the blanket, he witnessed a chilling sight. A woman sat on his stomach, weeping and staring at him with desperate longing. Paralyzed with fear, he felt a profound connection between them, like the yearning of a wife for her husband. The figure seemed to desire him in a way that transcended the boundaries of the living. Struggling to escape the spectral encounter, he managed to flee from the apartment in a state of sheer panic. Seeking refuge at our place, he recounted the harrowing night. It was then, in the light of day, that he made the decision to vacate the haunted dwelling. As he began packing, a curious neighbor inquired about the sudden move. Spurred by the recent encounter, he decided to share the spine-chilling incident. To his surprise, the neighbor revealed a dark secret about the apartment. Just a month before he moved in, A woman had tragically taken her own life in that very residence. Abandoned by her husband for another, she had met her end on the same bed where my friend's brother had slept for an entire month. Let me recount a chilling incident that unfolded a few years back, a tale that remains etched in my memory as a spine-tingling experience. It all began when I moved to a new city in the heart of January. Finding a suitable place to settle down proved to be quite the challenge. Eventually, my friend and I decided to share a living space while awaiting his anticipated salary raise. Our accommodation of choice was a rented 2 BHK house, courtesy of our friends. Initially, everything seemed fine. On the second day of our stay, my friend had plans to go out with his buddies, assuring me he would return by 9 p.m. As the clock approached 8 p.m., I found myself engrossed in movies on my laptop, hunger slowly creeping in. In response, I decided to whip up some noodles and indulge in a few chocolates. While heading into the room, an eerie turn of events began to unfold. The room's lights dimmed, and the windows, initially open, inexplicably closed. Perplexed, I moved to open the window. As I contemplated this strange occurrence, my phone, which I distinctly remembered switching off earlier, began buzzing on the bedside table. Bewilderment enveloped me. Before I could reach my phone, complete darkness enveloped the room. A sense of foreboding swept over me as I discerned a presence standing behind me. Fear paralyzed me, and I dared not turn around. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, revealing an unsettling silhouette behind me. Without anyone to confide in, I steeled myself to face this unsettling situation. In the profound silence, with only my breath audible, I cautiously traversed the room's obscurity. The pitch-black corner harbored a disconcerting ambiance, and unsettling thoughts began to invade my mind. The room, adorned with crosses, posters, and stickers, felt laden with an unspoken history. Determined to dispel the darkness, I navigated towards the kitchen in search of a candle. Sweating profusely, I maintained my composure until my friend returned. The night was etched with a lingering sense of disturbance, and I sought solace in sleep. Come morning, as we prepared breakfast, I stood near the window, gazing at the opposite house. An older couple, seemingly in their mid-50s, peered at us from their balcony. An eerie feeling washed over me, but I dismissed it from my mind. However, later that evening, as I stood outside while my friend tended to his bike, I scrutinized the names on the nameplate of the adjacent house. They were inscribed in an unfamiliar script, leaving my friend visibly troubled. That evening, he disclosed our imminent departure from that place. Packed and ready to move, we sought refuge in a new dwelling. It was then that my friend unfolded the haunting history of the house. Years prior, a couple had lived there, and a tragic incident unfolded when, after a heated argument, the wife took her own life by hanging. Our friends, too, sensed an eerie feeling of being watched, prompting their quest for a new place to stay. Initially skeptical of any supernatural presence, my friend's belief changed when I unknowingly read out the names of the deceased couple. A shiver ran down his spine, and he got suspicions that something malevolent going on. His unease escalated, and he even entertained the thought that I might be possessed, as I had no prior knowledge of the tragic incident. Let me share a chilling experience that unfolded before my eyes during my college days, precisely between 2018 and 2019. Brace yourself. Every detail is authentic, no exaggerations or fabrications. Before delving into the tale, allow me to set the stage. Prior to this incident, I was a staunch disbeliever in the supernatural. Ghosts, in my view, were mere products of the mind, and I used to playfully challenge the concept by boasting about strolling through graveyards at midnight unscathed. I even fantasized about engaging in a fistfight with ghosts at a fort. However, the events I'm about to recount shattered my skepticism, forcing me to acknowledge a dimension beyond our limited human perception. It all began with my friendship with a local guy in college. He hailed from a well-off family, his father holding a high-ranking government position. His younger sister, the focal point of this eerie tale, was in the 8th grade in 2014. It's crucial to note that his family was educated and prosperous, not the type to blindly believe in supernatural phenomena. As our friendship deepened, I often visited his home, and became acquainted with his family. The younger sister, a cheerful and cute child, reminded me of my own little brother. On one visit, I noticed an unusual mark on her forehead, resembling a cigarette burn. Concerned, I inquired about it. My friend explained that this mark appeared every month, lasting only a day, like it never existed. Strange, right? Digging deeper, I discovered that it coincided with every no-moon night during which she felt unwell. What made it even stranger was that she experienced a recurring dream. In this dream, a blurry man would appear, urging her to give him her hand, saying, "Here, child, come with me. There's nothing in this world." Now my mind was spinning with confusion. I probed her parents, who, like any parents, dismissed it as a trivial issue, a child's wild imagination. They chose not to connect the dots. My friend and I, being rational individuals, reluctantly followed suit. However, the unsettling incidents continued, escalating in 2016. One night after a party at my friend's house, the girl fell seriously ill. Coincidentally, it was a no-moon night, and post-midnight, she began to feel weak. Despite her mother's attempts to console her, her eyes seemed to sink, and she insisted on sleeping. As she lay on the couch, her eyes closed tightly, her family tried to wake her, only to discover an inexplicable surge of strength in her tiny body. When they finally pried open her clenched fist, the shocking sight sent shivers down their spines. Over 20 vertical blade-like cuts on her palm. In a matter of minutes, the familiar cigarette mark reappeared on her forehead. Panicked and bewildered, they rushed her to hospitals, facing skepticism and ridicule from doctors who dismissed their story. Even prestigious hospitals like St. John's and Springfield IL treated them with disdain. Frustrated and desperate, they eventually learned about a shrine renowned for occult practices. Despite their reluctance, they sought guidance from an experienced priest. I accompanied my friend and his family on this reluctant journey. After careful examination, the priest unveiled a spine-chilling narrative. According to him, 4 years prior, the girl had unknowingly stepped on a sacred item, unleashing a demonic force that had been attached to her ever since. This malevolent entity sought to devour her soul and manifested in her recurring dreams every no-moon night. The priest explained that the girl's strong will, manifested through her repeated refusal in the dreams, was what had kept her alive. Had she been weak-willed, she might not have survived. The priest performed rituals and chanted incantations, successfully exorcising the demon. Unlike the dramatic scenes portrayed in movies, there were no hair-raising moments. My friend witnessed the entire procedure, and thanks to his trust, he shared the harrowing details with me while emphasizing confidentiality. Since that day, the mysterious marks, dreams, and physical ailments ceased. The family's nightmare was seemingly over. This tale may sound outlandish to a 21st century mind, but every word recounted is true. To those dismissive of the other dimension, reconsider before making hasty judgments. The world holds mysteries beyond our comprehension, and sometimes experiences force us to reassess our beliefs. Don't be too certain about anything until you've walked in the shoes of those who have encountered the inexplicable. Stay safe, everyone. Recently, my 5-year-old has been acting out in ways that have me deeply concerned. He's had a history of encountering paranormal activities since he was a baby, but it had been relatively quiet for a while. However, after we moved into our new apartment, things took a turn for the worse. Despite people commenting on the positive vibe of our new place, my son's behavior became increasingly aggressive. He started throwing sharp objects and heavy items at us, seemingly finding pleasure in it. His joy at causing harm was unsettling, and it was affecting not only me, but also my parents, our maid, and everyone around him. Attempts to console him were met with strange responses. He would retreat to a corner, staring at us, and when asked about his thoughts, he spoke in a weird tone, expressing a desire to hurt us. He seemed unfazed by our efforts to comfort him, maintaining an unsettling smile. I initially attributed his behavior to excessive television watching during the summer, blaming it on the content he was exposed to. However, as his actions escalated, my fear grew. He slept little, ate almost nothing, yet displayed unusual strength when acting out physically. His behavior took an even more distressing turn as he started showing interest in adult content and behaving inappropriately. Feeling desperate, I turned to various sources for advice, including my mom's prayers and online articles about children's behavior. Some mentioned children exhibiting unusual adult-like behaviors, but my son's actions seemed extreme. After 4 challenging months, my aunt suggested seeking help from a paranormal expert. Desperate for a solution, I decided to give it a try. The expert believed a bad spirit might be attached to my son and suggested remedies to ward it off. To my surprise, after using the remedy, my son underwent a remarkable transformation. He stopped thinking or acting inappropriately, and the aggressive tendencies faded away. For over 30 days now, he's been behaving like any other normal kid. However, my concerns have shifted to his newfound attachment to his new toy. While I try not to overthink it, I've read about spirits associating themselves with toys, and it's only natural for me to be extra cautious about what influences are around my child. I was 21 when I witnessed a haunting experience involving my pregnant cousin aunt in 2018. She's always been a devout religious person. Fast forward to her being 7 months pregnant. She found it challenging to manage on her own while her husband was out of town. Normally, she'd wait for him to return home in the evening before heading to the temple. But this time, she decided to visit a nearby church in the evening, having missed her routine for 2 consecutive days. She gathered her offerings, left around 3 p.m., and returned a couple of hours later. However, right after getting home, she developed a high fever. Concerned, her mother-in-law, who suffered from arthritis, called a doctor and also reached out to my dad for assistance since our families were close. Despite the doctor dismissing it as a viral fever, every evening around 10 p.m., she'd experience a spike in temperature. Her husband, back in town, grew increasingly worried for her and the unborn child, consulting multiple doctors who couldn't diagnose anything. One afternoon, as I visited her with my parents, it was heart-wrenching to see her bedridden, her face devoid of any light. We were just about to have lunch, and my mom had helped her mother-in-law prepare vegetarian food for the 4 of us. We handed her a plate near her bed, and that's when the unimaginable happened. In a voice that wasn't hers, my aunt flung the plate at us, demanding non-vegetarian food. This was utterly shocking, since she had been a strict vegetarian her entire life. Her mother-in-law realized something was wrong, suspecting possession. We decided to take her to a priest, but she resisted vehemently, cursing and abusing anyone who touched her. Witnessing her confront 2 fully grown men, clawing and abusing frantically, was an unforgettable and disturbing sight. Ultimately, we called the priest to come to her. As he entered the house, he winced at the sight of my possessed aunt. Placing his hand on her head, he began chanting prayers. Despite her resistance, she revealed that she was a pregnant woman who used to visit the same church my aunt had recently gone to. She met with a tragic accident, losing both her and her unborn child. She declared her intent to take my aunt's child in 4 days. The priest remained calm, continuing his prayers and telling the spirit that harming another child wouldn't free her. Chanting more mantras and whispering something in her ear, my aunt seemed to experience intense pain. Moments later, she sobbed profusely and fainted. As she did, a gust of wind seemed to escape through us and out of the door. The priest assured us that she was now free and advised us not to worry anymore. The next morning, my aunt woke up with color returning to her cheeks. Fatefully, she delivered a healthy baby boy about 4 months later. They invited the priest for blessings, and everything has been fine since. The priest refused any fees, only asking for a favor, to donate food to the homeless and needy. 4 years later, I still vividly recall the scene, a powerful force that left me shaken and a newfound belief in the paranormal. The priest's words lingered, cautioning pregnant women to stay home during evenings due to entities attracted to them during that hour. When I was just 13 years old, a haunting incident unfolded in my family that left me both terrified and fascinated. At that time, my grandmother resided in a house about a mile away from ours. The atmosphere surrounding her dwelling was eerie, with a history steeped in tragedy and dark mysteries. My grandfather, a high-ranking military official during the late 19th century, had been assassinated, adding to the shadow of sorrow that hung over the family. It was a chilling realization that many of my forefathers, both on my paternal and maternal sides, had succumbed to black magic or witchcraft. A foreboding prediction loomed over me, that I too would meet the same fate. My grandmother, a renowned chess player in her time, lived alone in the house after my grandfather's demise. As she aged, my father took on the responsibility of caring for her, visiting daily and attending to her household needs. Everything seemed relatively normal until one day, after returning from her daughter's home in Turkey, my father noticed an amulet on her wrist. A seemingly innocuous gift from a relative, it went largely unnoticed by the family for an extended period. About a month later, the situation took a frightening turn. My grandmother's health deteriorated rapidly. Her once vibrant face grew unusually pale and wore a constant expression of melancholy. Irritation became her default emotion, and she spoke with an unsettling authority that sent shivers down our spines. Children, including myself, were inexplicably afraid to go near her. Her appetite dwindled, and she almost stopped eating altogether. The only time she felt hungry was in the dead of night. As days passed, her condition worsened, and an insatiable craving for red meat took hold. Even in her advanced age, she could devour limitless amounts of red meat if offered. Despite my father's efforts in providing medical treatment, her health continued to decline. It became evident to the elders of the colony that something otherworldly was at play. They believed she was possessed. One morning, a distant relative witnessed her standing aimlessly on the roof at the break of dawn. Fortunately, this relative was a local shaman with a keen sense for the supernatural. He claimed to sense an unearthly presence and insisted on visiting her that evening. He declared that she should observe a fast until he completed an exorcism. As promised, the shaman arrived that evening. Only he and my grandmother were allowed inside the house during the ritual. What transpired during the exorcism remained a mystery, as my grandmother had no recollection of the events. All she could recall was forcefully banging her head and hearing a blood-curdling scream emanating from the top of a palm tree behind her house. The shaman later revealed that the entity responsible for the possession had resided within her since the incident involving the amulet. The amulet, it appeared, had been a conduit for black magic or witchcraft. After the shaman left, my grandmother couldn't sleep the entire night. She sat in the sacred room and called my father at the crack of dawn. Overwhelmed, my father rushed to her side, listening intently as she recounted the harrowing experience. In a swift moment of determination, he snatched the amulet from her possession and set it ablaze in her backyard. As the amulet burned, a smell reminiscent of burnt human flesh permeated the air, confirming the malevolence embedded within it. The burning of the amulet marked the end of my grandmother's suffering. Gradually, she regained her health, but the trauma of the incident lingered in her memories. Years later, my grandmother passed away, leaving behind a chilling story that continues to haunt me to this day. As I reflect on that dark chapter of our family's history, I can't help but feel a mixture of fear and awe. The supernatural forces that played a role in my grandmother's possession defy rational explanation. As I approach my 28th summer, I find myself still haunted by the inexplicable events that unfolded when I was a mere 10-year-old. It's a tale I never fully comprehended, a lingering mystery that begs for an explanation. Our hangouts took a peculiar turn when Chris, Brad, and I found ourselves in a secluded park, surrounded by the remnants of an abandoned old convertible. What started as a casual gathering turned surreal as Brad suggested a seance. In a moment of jest, we played along, not anticipating the bizarre consequences that would follow. Chris, overcome with anxiety, fled the scene, leaving the rest of us bewildered. In the subsequent weeks, peculiar incidents unfolded, and Brad began claiming to be possessed by a demon named Mun. At first, we dismissed it as an attention-seeking ploy. However, strange occurrences started happening when we were alone. I, particularly, experienced a barrage of inexplicable events in my home. Framed pictures would launch themselves at me, water faucets turned on mysteriously, and my little sister began interacting with unseen entities. The girls, Lori and Shona, also began sharing their unnerving experiences. They spoke of glimpses of a mysterious blue figure, something furry darting behind furniture, and different forms walking through their house. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, and fear overshadowed our once carefree hangouts. Possessions, automatic writings, and ominous messages from Brad became the norm. He claimed to be a vessel for the demon Mun, and disturbingly accurate details about our lives would be revealed through his bizarre episodes. It became undeniable that something beyond our comprehension was unfolding. Despite attempts to distance ourselves from Brad, the intensity of the supernatural occurrences escalated. Chris, attempting to confront Brad about the impact on our lives, experienced a traumatic encounter at Brad's house. According to Chris, an unseen force threw him against a wall, forever altering him. As the situation spiraled out of control, the girls decided to confide in their parents, while I turned to my unsupportive and drug-addicted mother. Lori and Shona's parents attempted to intervene, visiting Brad's home and encountering a disturbing array of voodoo-like items. The mother's unsettling behavior only fueled their fears. Grounded and distressed, the girls, Chris and I, found ourselves in the clutches of a malevolent force we couldn't comprehend. The supernatural disturbances reached a horrifying climax when Brad, claiming to be Mun, targeted Lori. Desperate and terrified, we witnessed inexplicable occurrences, finger impressions and scratches forming on Lori's throat without any visible assailant. It was a moment of sheer horror, with her gasping for breath and collapsing to the floor. Then, as abruptly as it began, everything stopped. In the aftermath, Lori's family moved away, seeking refuge from the unexplainable horrors that had consumed their lives. I, too, relocated to a new house, hoping to leave the nightmarish events behind. However, the haunting manifestations persisted, mimicking voices and reproducing eerie occurrences. Even when Lori's family moved to Indonesia due to her father's military assignment, the supernatural disturbances followed. Brad's letters from abroad brought no relief, as the inexplicable events continued. The mimicry of my mother's and sister's voices added a chilling layer to the already unsettling experiences. The scariest encounter of my life unfolded during my college years, a spine-chilling tale that continues to haunt my memories. It was a summer vacation, and my family and friends had gathered for a trip to visit relatives in the province. My mother and sister had headed off with the older family members, planning to meet halfway to our grandparents' house the following morning. In the solitude of my room, adorned with religious icons that usually offered a sense of security, I found myself alone. While my friends embraced the fresh mountain air, I opted to stay indoors, seeking respite from the weariness of university life. As I sat on the bed, engrossed in a book, I began to sense an unusual presence moving near the room. Uncertain if it was a living being or something else, I initially ignored it, determined to focus on my reading. However, the minutes ticked by, and a soft, caring voice called my name, emanating from every corner of the room. The voice, though familiar, held an unsettling quality, accompanied by the distinct smell of sulfur lingering in the air. Despite the angelic undertones, I felt a malevolent entity in the room. My hands shook uncontrollably, my heart raced, and the room's temperature plummeted. The voice, filled with rage and disgust, uttered my last name, sending shivers down my spine. Startled, I dropped my book, closed my eyes, and tried to distance myself mentally from the eerie occurrence. In an attempt to combat the fear welling up within me, I recited a protective phrase. As I walk through the valley in the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I repeated this mantra, focusing solely on my own voice, attempting to drown out the disturbing presence around me. However, a sinister laughter filled the room, the voice taking on a sadistic tone that seemed to merge both male and female attributes. Paralyzed by fear, I desperately tried to ask the entity's intentions, but found my voice stifled by the overwhelming malevolence in the air. The room felt charged with an ominous energy, and I sensed the entity reveling in my terror. As I struggled to regain control over my emotions, horrifying images flooded my mind, scenes of torture, murder, and pagan rituals. Determined to block out the nightmarish visions, I attempted to divert my thoughts, but the entity hissed and laughed in response. Lying in bed, my body felt numb and drained, and the fiend's presence seemed insurmountable. Realizing my crude methods were insufficient, I knew I needed divine intervention. Summoning an outburst of adrenaline, I reached for the Holy Rosary in my back pocket. Clasping it tightly, I recited the Lord's Prayer, attempting to repel the entity's influence. For a moment, it seemed to relent, but then it joined in, whispering the prayer with a mocking tone, as if playing a twisted game. In a final push, I switched to the Apostles' Creed, affirming my Christian faith. The entity fell silent, and gradually I felt its grip loosening. The fear began to dissipate, and as I stood up, I sensed the entity moving frantically around the room. A hissing sound permeated the air before a sudden silence descended. Examining my hand, I noticed blood dripping down. I had grasped the rosary so tightly that it embedded into my palm. While tending to my minor wound in the bathroom, I glimpsed a dark, hooded figure standing behind me, an entity that had accompanied me through various paranormal experiences. About 30 minutes after this harrowing encounter, screams echoed from the outside corridor. My friends and cousins, trembling with fear, recounted a terrifying experience with an Ouija board variation called Spirit of the Glass. The entity introduced itself as Caleb, initially appearing benign before turning malevolent, spelling out profanities and causing chaos in the room. Their ordeal lasted for 45 minutes, with chairs tossed around and windows vibrating. Strangely, my relatives claimed to have heard no screams or sounds of chaos during that time. Yet, upon entering the room, the aftermath told a different story. A shattered glass, a broken chair, and an unmistakable sense of something ominous. Their ordeal lasted for 45 minutes, with chairs tossed around and windows vibrating. Strangely, my relatives claimed to have heard no screams or sounds of chaos during that time. Yet upon entering the room, the aftermath told a different story. A shattered glass, a broken chair, and an unmistakable sense of something ominous. Several months into my work-related absence, my wife had tour locate us from Canada to North Carolina. She managed to find a beautiful house for us to rent, quite extravagant compared to our usual standards. It was spacious, modern, and had all the comforts one could ask for. However, as my wife started settling in, strange occurrences began to unfold. She would call me, describing unsettling dreams and a scary sensation of being watched, specifically from the bathroom and closet area. More disturbingly, our son claimed to have been pushed so forcefully that she tumbled down, believing it was my wife who did it. Yet my wife was sitting on the couch, a good 10 feet away. Familiar with handling such situations, I prescribed the usual remedy, placing a potent crucifix in the room and advising my wife to shield herself with white light before going to bed. It seemed like a standard approach to ward off negative energies, and for a while, it kept the entity at bay. Upon my return, however, I could sense a lingering presence in the house, a distinct feeling that something was watching us from the darkness of a large closet area connected to the bathroom. This space lacked natural sunlight and became pitch dark at night. Despite the crucifix seemingly preventing the entity from entering the room, it persisted in its unsettling gaze from the closet. Determined to reclaim our space, I initiated the usual protocol, sternly commanding the unwelcome presence to leave. Yet, it was unyielding, showing no signs of fear or retreat. The situation escalated when we discovered a picture of our children shattered in the middle of the frame, as if an unseen force had hurled something at it. This malevolent entity seemed undeterred by our attempts to expel it. One evening, as my wife left for work, I witnessed a large shadow dart out of the bedroom, almost as if it were pursuing her towards the car. Disturbingly, not long after this incident, she suffered a stroke and was involved in a significant car accident. Miraculously, both events left no lasting injuries, but the ominous occurrences continued. During my subsequent travels, I learned that our landlord was evicting us. Strangely, I felt a sense of relief, recognizing the urgency to leave quickly and not be followed. However, the process was impeded as my wife suffered a severe eye and face injury while moving. On the last day in that house, both of us heard tapping on windows, doors, and sounds emanating from the attic, even though the house was empty. I was certain by then that we were dealing with something beyond the paranormal, a demon. The oppressive presence lingered until our final moments in the house, tapping and knocking persistently. The last night, as I left the house, a shadow flitted around the yard, a sinister farewell from the malevolent force we were leaving behind. Relieved to be out of that haunted house, we soon realized the demon had tagged along to our new residence. Although it continued to manifest itself, the sunny atmosphere and positive energy of the new house seemed to resist its influence. The entity opened doors, appeared in the hall, and bothered my son in the basement. I advised him not to succumb to fear, as indifference would likely bore the entity into leaving. Encountering ghosts had been part of my experiences, but this was an entirely different ordeal. The only solution, it seemed, was to escape swiftly before the malevolent force could follow. It was an unnerving learning experience, a stark reminder that some entities cannot be willed away or scared off, and leaving promptly might be the only defense against potential tragedy. As the disturbances subsided and life returned to normal, we carried with us the lessons learned. Many years ago, when I lived in a small city, I won't specify the name for privacy reasons, our next-door neighbor was an unpleasant woman. My grandmother never explained why this lady harbored such strong animosity towards her. Despite the ongoing grudge, the neighbor was oddly friendly too, and to this day, I remain clueless about the root cause of her resentment. One day, my aunt returned home from school feeling famished. The neighbor was on her porch when she suddenly called my aunt to assist her with something heavy inside her house. As my aunt went over to help, I attempted to intervene, but an invisible force pushed me back. I saw no one near the door. In a panic, I rushed to my grandmother to share what was happening, but it was too late. When we reached my aunt, she was already emerging from the neighbor's house, holding a sandwich. My grandmother swiftly took it away from her, but she had almost finished eating it. That night, around midnight, an acrid smell filled the air, alerting us to something burning. We woke up everyone to find the source. It led us to my aunt's room. I couldn't open the door, but when my uncle entered, the horror on his face suggested he had encountered something demonic. Grabbing his hand, my uncle snapped out of his shock. When I turned to see what had scared him, my aunt sat enherbed, staring at me with a frightening expression, as if a demonic force was trying to break free from within her. Over the next few days, her condition worsened. She started fainting, and various entities within her attempted to manifest. A little girl, a man, a few demons, and one entity claiming to be the devil plagued her. I became terrified of being alone with her, as these episodes always seemed to happen when she was close to me. The spirit of a little girl tried to manifest whenever I was near, but there was one malevolent entity that particularly despised me. One day, passing by my aunt, unaware that she was in her possessed state, she suddenly grabbed me. Her face transformed into something sinister, not her own but a demonic presence that sounded like an evil man. I screamed so intensely that I nearly passed out. My grandmother urgently called my uncles to assist in separating my aunt, or this malevolent force, from me. She pulled me closer and warned that the entity knew who I was, advising me to watch myself, as my luck might run out someday. Desperate for help, I sought refuge in the church and became a regular choir girl. I confided in our priest, who offered assistance by providing me with a small bottle of holy water for protection. The next day, the priest visited our house but hesitated to enter, claiming the force inside was too strong for him. He insisted on bringing more people for support. As he was leaving, he mentioned hearing the entity scream that my aunt's soul had been offered to him, and he intended to stay until he claimed it. Concerned, the priest returned the following day with 3 others, but their attempts to help proved futile. My aunt remained unchanged. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. This ordeal persisted for an excruciating 2 years, an everyday nightmare. To this day, I don't know how my aunt was eventually cured. Family members have kept the details from me. However, the fear lingers, preventing me from being alone with her. I sense the same demonic presence that once threatened me is still with her, making me afraid of her. This story happened a few years back when I was in 4th grade, just a 10-year-old kid. Me and 2 of my friends shared an interest in magic, ghosts, and all things mysterious. Even though we didn't really believe in that stuff, we liked playing around with the idea to see if anything would happen. One day, we were chatting about spirits, magic, and such. One friend brought up the topic of the devil. I decided to join in and made a big mistake. I said the devil should just show up here if he exists, just to prove he's real. I'm sure he doesn't. I said it for fun to see if anything unusual would occur. Little did I know that was the worst thing to say. I unknowingly called upon the devil, and it turned out to be a huge mistake. As I continued talking, something strange happened. I suddenly fainted on the bed. My friends, thinking I was joking as we often played pranks, didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. To them, it seemed like I fainted for a minute, but for me, everything felt like a brief blackout. My friends got worried because my laughter, which usually followed our pranks, didn't come as quickly as usual. They mentioned I even stopped breathing during the faint. When I got up, everything seemed normal to me, and I resumed talking about what we were discussing earlier. Strangely, I had no memory of how I fell or how I got back up. Suddenly, my friends accused me of pretending to faint, saying I scared them. I looked at them confused, having no idea what they were talking about. They thought I was joking, but I insisted I didn't pretend anything. I just continued our conversation. They seemed unsure and slightly disbelieving, but we decided to brush it off and move on. A few years later, we revisited that strange event. It stayed in our minds because after that day, I felt like an evil presence followed me everywhere. My behavior changed, and I became mean to people, something I wouldn't usually do. I expressed anger, hurting others unintentionally, only to feel regret afterward. It felt like something else had control over me, making me act against my will. This went on for a few months and then stopped abruptly. I returned to my usual self, but that wasn't the only peculiar occurrence. Strange things happened. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, finding myself sitting on my bed instead of lying down. I saw shadows, and that eerie feeling of being followed by evil lingered. Thankfully, it all ceased after a few months, and I was myself again. This never happened again, and I felt fortunate. I learned my lesson the hard way. People often get haunted by evil for a long time after summoning the devil or engaging in such activities. Somehow, I seem to have escaped the prolonged consequences. I consider myself lucky for that. Calling upon dark forces taught me to be cautious, and I'm grateful those eerie experiences are just memories of the past. Back in high school, I visited my friend's house after school. While hanging out in her room, she dropped a bombshell on me. She claimed her house was haunted. Now, I wasn't really a believer in ghosts at the time, and I thought she might be a bit loopy. She started recounting bizarre incidents, saying that the ghost or whatever it was liked to play around with the TV channels, switch radio stations, and even tear up cat pictures on her wall. Those cat pictures were just cutouts from a calendar, nothing special. After hearing her spooky tales, we decided to watch some TV. She set the channel, and lo and behold, it changed. We repeated this ritual several times, with the channel stubbornly shifting every time she tried to keep it on the same one. I was a bit spooked, but my skepticism kicked in. I figured she was playing tricks with the remote. No big deal. Next, she wanted to listen to music, and the same channel-changing drama unfolded. I was convinced she was just messing with me. Growing frustrated with our failed attempts at TV and music, she started rummaging under her bed. Like most high school kids, she used that space as a hiding spot for various things. I heard a rip, and I thought, here we go again. She looked up at me from her bed and told me to check my cat pictures. I glanced around the room, and they all seemed intact until I reached the one behind my head. It was ripped in half. I nearly screamed. There was no way anyone could have done that. It wasn't torn when I walked in, and there were only her and me in the room. Feeling uneasy, I looked into the mirror across the room and saw a dark shadow. I felt a chill down my spine. The atmosphere in the room changed, and I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling. My friend noticed my unease and insisted that something strange was going on. She said we needed to do something to communicate with whatever was in her room. I reluctantly agreed, still clinging to the idea that this was just some elaborate prank. She brought out a Ouija board, and we placed our hands on the planchette. I was skeptical, but curious. We asked if there was anyone there, and to my surprise, the planchette moved to yes. I felt a mix of fear and disbelief. We continued asking questions, and the responses spelled out a chilling story of someone who had lived in that house before. Suddenly, the room felt colder, and we heard creaking sounds. My friend's face turned pale, and she abruptly closed the session, hastily putting away the Ouija board. We sat there in silence, absorbing the strange encounter. The atmosphere remained tense, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something had shifted in the room. As we gathered ourselves, my friend suggested we explore more about the house's history. We went to her parents, who revealed that the previous owner had passed away under mysterious circumstances. The pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place, and I began reconsidering my skepticism. Over the next few weeks, peculiar events continued to unfold in her house. Objects moved on their own, strange sounds echoed through the halls, and the air often felt heavy. My skepticism slowly eroded, as I couldn't find logical explanations for these occurrences. The dark shadow I saw in the mirror haunted my thoughts, and the ripped cat picture remained a vivid, unexplained memory. We decided to seek help from a paranormal investigator. The investigator confirmed the presence of supernatural energy in the house and performed a cleansing ritual to rid it of lingering spirits. The atmosphere lightened, and the strange incidents came to a halt. Our house was already pretty creepy when I had my bedroom upstairs. I discovered someone had carved into the inside of my closet door, stating, "So-and-so died here on such and such a date." I brushed it off, thinking some kid who lived here before must have written it to spook people. Then my mom decided to expand our family with her not-so-great boyfriend, twice. As my brother and I grew older, our bedrooms got shifted to the basement. It was okay. We wanted our privacy from the parents anyway. One weekend, my best friend, Lizzie, planned to spend the night. My bed wasn't big enough for both of us, so we opted to sleep on the basement living room couch. The room was unfinished, a bit of a mess from me, my brother, and whoever we had over. My brother's room was right across from the living room doorway, and the moonlight and streetlights provided a faint glow. As it got late, Lizzie and I decided to get ready for bed. In the cold, unfinished basement, we gathered lots of blankets, turned on some low music, and turned off the lights. Lizzie was lying on the couch facing the doorway, and I was on the opposite side. We chatted about typical 18-year-old gossip when Lizzie stopped mid-story. "Who's standing in the doorway?" she asked. My adrenaline spiked. I was already somewhat afraid of the dark. "What are you talking about?" I replied. "There's someone standing in the doorway, wearing a trench coat and a black hat," she whispered. "You're joking. Don't lie to me," I said nervously. She closed her eyes and it was gone. We waited, but it didn't return, so we resumed our conversation. Lizzie was sharing details about some class when she stopped again. "Did you hear that?" she asked. On the other side of the room, near the laundry room, we heard a swishing sound across the cement floor, as if someone were pushing boxes. Lizzie heard it. I felt a sense of unease. We waited, observing everything. Minutes passed, and we resumed chatting. Swish! The sound came again from the laundry room. This time, we both heard it. Being girls and witnessing something odd for the first time that night, we started to freak out. My brother was upstairs watching TV, so we tried calling him down. No response. We listened for any signs of life, anything. I heard the water turn off from the shower upstairs. We screamed for my brother again. When he came downstairs, he seemed unfazed by our stories. Lizzie and I decided to sleep upstairs, and as we walked by the laundry room, we noticed a box in the middle of the floor and my mom's clothes hanging from the pipes swinging rapidly. Definitely not something the wind could do, especially since none of the windows were open. After that night, the basement held a more unsettling vibe. Strange occurrences became commonplace. Objects moved on their own, and eerie sounds echoed through the halls. My skepticism began to wane as there seemed to be no logical explanations. The creepy atmosphere lingered in the basement, and the memory of that mysterious figure in the doorway haunted me. One day, my mom decided to look into the house's history, and we discovered some unsettling facts. The previous owner had died under mysterious circumstances. The puzzle pieces fell into place, and I couldn't dismiss everything as mere coincidence. Despite the oddities, life went on. Until one day, a paranormal investigator confirmed supernatural energy in the house. A cleansing ritual was performed to rid the space of lingering spirits. The strange incidents ceased, and the atmosphere lightened. Reflecting on that unsettling basement experience, I realized there's more to the world than meets the eye. Sometimes, skepticism can't explain everything, and life's mysteries remain unsolved. My name is Samantha, and I'm a 31-year-old single mother to a lovely baby boy who will be turning 3 in December. We reside in Springfield, IL. Until a few months ago, I never believed in ghosts or the paranormal, but then something happened that changed my perspective entirely. For the past 5 years, I lived in a rented apartment just about 2 miles from my parents' house. Being a single mom, I greatly appreciated the support my parents provided, especially my father, who often stayed over to help with my son. However, our peaceful existence took an unexpected turn when my landlord informed me that he planned to sell the apartment. He gave us a 2-month notice to find a new place. In the search for a new home, my dad came across a house and, without consulting me thoroughly, finalized the deal. It was a 3-bedroom house, and while I found it nice, something within me didn't quite feel right during our initial visit. Nevertheless, due to the given circumstances and after some arguments, I agreed to move into this new house. And that's when everything started to take a strange turn. From the very first day we shifted, an eerie and uncomfortable atmosphere enveloped the house. It was unnaturally cold, regardless of the weather outside. I started feeling a constant sensation of being watched, a peculiar feeling that someone was always close by. Initially, I dismissed it as my imagination running wild. My typical day involved leaving for work around 9 a.m., leaving my dad in charge of taking care of my baby. When I returned, I would take over, and my dad would go back to his place, returning later for dinner. However, one evening after my dad had left, I experienced an incident that left me shaken. My son and I were alone, and around 7 p.m. he wanted to sleep. Deciding to take a nap myself, I laid down next to him. As I was contemplating whether to rest or do some chores, the bedroom door suddenly slammed shut before my eyes. Shocked, I took a moment to process what had just happened. After a few minutes, I got up and left the room to smoke on the balcony, only to find that the door, which I had left wide open, was now completely shut. Disturbed but composed, I quickly went inside to check on my crying son, who was sitting on the bed, visibly upset. From that day onwards, strange occurrences became a regular part of our lives in that house. My son, too young to communicate clearly, often pointed at things that were invisible to me. His unease and refusal to enter the house at times intensified my concerns. Footsteps outside my bedroom door became a nightly routine. Heavy, distinct footsteps, as if a man in slippers was pacing back and forth. The overall aura of the house turned negative, and there were moments when the air felt thick and suffocating. It seemed as if something or someone did not want us there. One night, I woke up to a disturbing sound, akin to someone drilling into my ear. As I opened my eyes, I saw a black figure sitting at the foot of my bed, staring at me. The image froze me, and after a few minutes, I either fell back asleep or passed out, unable to comprehend what had transpired. The distressing incidents continued, affecting my son's behavior and leaving me tired and worried for his safety. Things escalated when my son began pointing at invisible entities, prompting me to share my concerns with my father. He then revealed that a neighbor had informed him about a tragic incident that occurred in the house just 4 months before we moved in. The landlady's husband, an attorney facing financial turmoil, had taken his own life in the bedroom where my son and I slept. Understanding the history of the house added a chilling dimension to our experiences. It became clear that whatever presence lingered in the house did not intend harm, but wanted to convey that we were unwelcome. Every attempt to rationalize the occurrences was met with more explicit manifestations, emphasizing that we should leave. After 4 challenging months, I decided it was time to move out for the sake of my son's well-being. The entity seemed determined to make our lives unbearable until the very last day. Even when I tried to communicate our departure, the disturbances persisted until we finally left the haunted house. It was my first semester in college, and I was heading to an important data science class. I had recently started driving a motorcycle, and I always felt extra cautious when someone sat behind me. My college was conveniently located in my hometown, just 6 miles away from my home. The month was September, and a light drizzle added a soothing touch to the atmosphere. On my route to college, there was a stretch of unpaved road that had turned muddy due to the rain. As I approached this tricky part of the journey, I noticed a lady trying to flag me down. She seemed to be struggling to walk on the slippery road, and she asked if I could drop her off at a nearby location. I hesitated, explaining that it was challenging for me to ride a two-wheeler with someone sitting behind me, especially on the slippery roads. Despite my initial refusal, she insisted and took a seat behind me on the motorcycle, urging me to start driving. Surprisingly, as I started driving, I felt a sense of comfort. It was unexpected, and I realized I had overcome my fear of riding with a passenger. After a few minutes of riding in silence, I decided to break the ice and asked her where she wanted to go. In an eerie and cold tone, she replied, "The same place you are going." Her response sent shivers down my spine. How did she know where I was heading? I became uneasy but continued driving. We rode in silence for a while until she suddenly said, "Stop here!" Without second guessing, I promptly brought my motorcycle to a halt. As I turned back to look at her, she was nowhere to be seen. My heart sank and fear gripped me. Without wasting any time, I sped away from that spot. I couldn't shake off the fear and immediately called my mom to share the chilling encounter. She, too, was frightened by the strange and unsettling incident. I couldn't comprehend how she knew my destination, and more bewilderingly, how she vanished without a trace. That night, I found it difficult to sleep, replaying the strange events over and over in my mind. Initially skeptical, I decided to consult an elderly neighbor known for her knowledge of local folklore and supernatural occurrences. As I approached her house, I could feel a mix of anxiety and curiosity. The neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, greeted me warmly and invited me inside. I hesitantly shared my encounter with the mysterious lady, describing the chilling details of her abrupt disappearance. Mrs. Johnson listened attentively, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding. She explained that our town had long been surrounded by tales of spirits and unexplained phenomena. According to local lore, encounters with spectral passengers were not uncommon, especially on rainy days. Some believed these spirits sought a ride to reach their intended destination, often harboring unfinished business or unfulfilled desires. The elderly neighbor shared stories of others who had experienced similar encounters, offering a sense of reassurance that I wasn't alone in this strange occurrence. She suggested that I seek guidance from a spiritual leader or perform a cleansing ritual to dispel any lingering negative energy. Grateful for Mrs. Johnson's insight, I decided to follow her advice. With the guidance of a local priest, we performed a ritual to cleanse both my home and myself of any spiritual energy. The priest assured me that these rituals often helped people find closure and peace after such encounters.